Okay, here's a new one just came out today, and I consider it to be somewhat of a vindication video here. For what we're looking at is a 40,000-year-old object, which was known to be a tool slash ritual object, and that's about all that was ever listed as up until now. We take a close look at it. It's made out of mammoth bone, and it's all been shaved down to a point that it's flat like a plank. But looking at the bottom side and the top side, inside of each of the holes there, it has a swirl cut into it, much like a toilet going down, or a seashell design. In fact, if you look deeper into it, it actually gets a deep groove cutting into that there. And people came up with all kinds of different ideas. I remember hearing quite a few whenever people looked at this, but they pretty much set it aside because it didn't mean anything. What do you mean it didn't mean anything? Well, in the same cave, there was the Holfels cave is where this was found at, and that's the same site that was found with the Lion Man, the famous statue of a man with a lion's head that's on it. And so things like this almost got put aside. It would have been a lot more looked at if that would have been the neatest thing they found, perhaps. I believe in the major paper, the guys said they were leaning towards this being a ritual object that the main guru shaman would carry. Something along that line. People tried to take that out in left field with it and say, it's got 3 holes with it. That's a symbol of Orion. And they said, well, look, it had a 4th hole, but it broke off. Maybe that's even why they tossed this thing down and we even found it in the first place, is that it's broken. But what's with the 4th star? Oh, well, there used to be a 4th star in Orion's belt, but it went supernova, and they're trying to tell you by this bone. And it's like, really? You're going to go with that? All kinds of things were said about this. Well, that 4th end, the broken end, was just where it was on a necklace, and it was hanging on the necklace. And they go, that makes sense if this thing wasn't huge, to the point that that would be like Fred Flintstone jewelry or worse. Right? These aren't hip-hop cavemen. So, what is this actually used for? Well, let's just get into it here, if you haven't figured it out yet. For they found the true purpose of the ancient mammoth bone artifact is finally revealed. A team of scientists have identified a Stone Age cordage tool used to manufacture rope, and the use of this tool completely changed human life and productivity in prehistoric times. Now again, they're going to take that viewpoint that this is perhaps the very first one and they just invented how to make rope. I'm telling you, it's a fairly advanced tool with the swirls going into it, calibrated to a length and a width. They knew what the hell they were doing, and this was a progressive thing. For they may have done it in a strange way that involved 5 people at one time with all their fingers into it and doing a super braiding type thing. There's all kinds of things that can be brought into it, but one thing's for sure, they at least are saying now that rope production, and not just rope production, but rope production like we see today, corded, multi-braided, wound-in rope, was being made at 40,000 BC. Now, I've showed you 26,000 BC and 16,000 BC rope with remnants of made out of hemp, which was still made in this design. Back in a couple of different videos a couple of years ago, and I actually referred to this when we went to the Holfels and talked about the lion thing, but it was just a side idea, and I was like, well, there's this weird tool some people call a flute. I'm not sure I've even said much more about it. But a series of slow advancement in cordage production, they say, technology, allowed humans to progress from the primitive lashing and binding of tree vines and roots required to drag heavy animals back to campsites from hunting plains to the manufacture of immense steel cables used in modern industry today. Well, it's weird that we use still a similar cording cabling type of idea. It's where string's not so strong, but if you put it together and braid it right, it becomes 3 times stronger. And if you find certain plants like hemp that are real strong, that are 3 times stronger too, it starts to multiply itself, and now you get a rope that you can hang from, or you could build a structure with, and things like that. He says to drag back animals. I'm saying to lash together things, all kinds of ways of lashing different types of trees and wood together to make homes and domiciles and to form a primitive chair concept that they probably had going on, all kinds of things. The newly discovered Stone Age cordage tool, according to researchers, was a huge breakthrough in the rope making process. Here's one of the doctors standing in the cave itself, it looks like. Nicholas Conrad at the University of Toboggan Museum was the first archaeologist to understand the mammoth bones Stone Age cordage tool. Nicholas Conrad is the director of the Institute of Archaeological Sciences at the University of Toboggan University. He was the first archaeologist to explore the Hohlfels Cave in southwestern Germany, and during his investigation, um, his team found a 40,000-year-old bar of mammoth bone, 20 centimeters or 8 inches in length, that had 4 holes drilled in it. Inspection of the artifact showed that each hole was lined with precisely cut spiral incisions. Archaeologists have since determined that this unique tool was created by a Stone Age cordage reduction specialist. In other words, somebody had specialized and got this idea down to a new level, if you will, right? But in that cave also was found the lion of Hohlfels Cave. Here's a close-up of one of those spirals, how it goes in. And where's my pointer? It's not handy. I'll use this. So you can see that they go in and they curl, but also notice the depth of each one of the curls, right? And the spiral, and how this one cuts over that one, cuts over that one, and it swirls. It's basically doing something very much like your toilet bowl. But what that effectively allows is multi-braided strings to be pulled through at the same time as they're braided and pulled through, and imparts a twist upon it that whenever all 4 of those get braided in together at the same time, ends up making supercord. We have little machines and stuff that do this today, but people used to do stuff like this in the day. It's like keeping the twist, like pith, like using the hearts of palm trees. That's what makes incredible rope out of that. And you would keep it twisted and a torque on it while you're putting it all into the rope, so it has that pull. It allows that whenever you let off of it and it's all held together, to whenever you put a shock onto it, it actually goes and back into that point, and it gives it some extra tension rather than trying to break itself. It actually tries to grip itself. The other little scratches you see on there, little marks that look like an X or a cross, or things, maybe perhaps even a swastika. No, that's just, I think, pareidolia, trying to see something in something. So that's a close-up of it. Replacing the God of the gaps with science, he says. The term God of the gaps is popularly used by atheists to describe God's existence in circumstance science can't currently explain. But this term is also used in archaeology to refer to any artifact that cannot be immediately identified, and is thus usually classified as ritualistic or ceremonial. We have this all the time, and also anytime that there's a ring, it's the Stonehenge of so-and-so because Stonehenge is so famous. why in some way that gives reverence. There's other times whenever you go, it's a temple, and you're like, does every bigger building have to be a temple? And does every little object you can't understand have to be ritualistic or ceremonial? Or both? The original purpose of this strange mammoth bone tool was no different, though. According to a report in The Guardian, the archaeologists first believed that this artifact might have been a part of a musical instrument or a religious object. So there we go with that flute kind of thing, but no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't get a whistle to happen out of it. And somebody's quick examination would say, well, if there's no hole running through it, it's not a flute type thing, and this would have been conjoined whistles. And since they're all about the same size a hole, except for one's a hair smaller, it would have made pretty much the same tone. That doesn't make any sense, and you can't get it to even be a whistle. So that's not it, but they sure went through a bunch of trouble to do this swirl. Oh, it's comets, and there was four of them, and one of them blew up. See, and no, this thing was being used for a long time until somebody dropped it on a rock and it broke the fourth one, and boy, didn't everybody get pissed off. Or maybe it was doing it just during rope forming. Who knows? But that's perhaps the only reason it was left there and not someplace a muck that would never be found. However, when Dr. Viral Rotz of the University of Liège in Belgium fed raw plant fibers through the holes of a bronze replica of the mammoth bone tool, he was able to create four separated twisted strands that became combined to form rope. So like four twisted into one, and if we're starting with something that would be more like making a piece of twine for each of those four, it comes out being a pretty damn decent piece of rope. Although that one that I've talked about that's like 16,000 years ago seems to have been hand braided perhaps, but apparently not. They just didn't know there was a tool existed that could have done something like that. And not 16 or 26, 27,000, but 40,000, and it's already a decent perfective object and made out of mammoth bone instead of something else. But man, that stuff was useful. And another thing too, if they ever made one of these out of wood, today you wouldn't even see a piece of wood with holes in it. There'd just be a rod of sawdust there. So lucky again that they made it out of that. And it was kept just a certain way. So it's known as the earliest tool for making rope. Its impact would have been revolutionary, stated Rotz, allowing for advancements in bow and arrow manufacturing, fishing and hunting nets, snares and traps, and for making better clothing and containers for carrying food. And I'm telling you, they were using it constantly back then in baskets and stuff and everything. Making woven type deals, necklaces. We find the remnants of this. Well, we find the rope's gone away quite often. It rotted away, but there's this whole string of bear teeth or fox teeth or things like that with perfect little holes drilled into them too that no one wants to talk about. It shows you there was a little bit more going on there too. Precursor to like bead manufacturing, which reaches a lot farther back than people ever gave credit for in the old days either. Here she is braiding a cord and showing you how to make a cord. Now you can imagine if you braid and make a cord like that she's got there, and it makes it stronger than even four if you just held them. Now if you put four of those together, run them through that thing there, and then start braiding those together, how you start to multiply its effect of strength at one time. You can't just do separate ones and then put them and hold them together. That doesn't quite give 3 times the same strength. You know, it has a mathematical workout, but if you make it into the same object, it starts to hold it. While the mammoth bone tool from Holfell's cave is impressive and is not the only one, according to Professor Chris Stringer of the Natural History Museum in London, a range of similar tools were also discovered in Gau's cave in Cheddar Gorge in England. That demonstrates how rope was made in Britain at the end of the last ice age. through about 15,000 years old and constructed using reindeer antler devices. Very similar, though. The Cheddar Gorge devices have the same holes with spiral incisions as the hole-filled cave's mammoth bone tools do. And now we've solved the mystery of a few different artifacts. And it's amazing that the one that was 40,000 years old showed it to us, because a lot of times it goes the other way, where we'll find one 8,000 years old and somebody will put two and two together and say, hey, this is da-da-da, and make rope. And you're like, wow, that looks very much like this one here at 15,000 years ago. And you go, hey, Jim, that looks very much like this thing 40,000 years old that we found right here. And it's got those same swirls in it. In fact, mine looks better than yours, and it's made out of mammoth bone. What's up with that? So here we have another case of something that's, oh, I don't know, what's my catchphrase? It's in at least 150 of my videos. No, man, it's got to be over 400 now. Much older than previously thought, and I think he even uses the phrase. But because mammoth bone cordage tool was discovered in one of the most remote Stone Age sites in Europe, dating from the early Stone Age, scientists say this indicates rope making had already become a vitally important human activity, much earlier than previously thought. Oh, I thought it was at the very end he said it, but ha ha ha, there you go. But there's another video I might do coming up where they've discovered that Neanderthal was making string and complex cordage that you would have had to compile and make a bigger rope that they're making here with, but at least he was doing that. So how far does it go back? Well, at least 40,000 years. And they always say it's the first, and it's this, and it's that, and it revolutionized, and it's like, no, by that time it was already going on. You think this is the first one they ever made? You think this is the second one they ever made? You think other people had this technology spread out across people by that time? Certain people did. Untwisting the history of cordage production. When the 15,000-year-old cordage production tools were first discovered in Gall's Cave in Cheddar Gorge, they were incorrectly categorized as ritual batons. They thought to have been carried by tribal chiefs or shamans as indicators of rank, but the spiral holes, through further research, were found to have a specific function. It is now clear that they must have been used to make or manipulate rope. Dr. Rott stated that this mammoth bone cordage tool answers the question of how rope was made in the Paleolithic, which according to him has puzzled scientists for decades. Well, a lot of these tools puzzled them for decades. I know for a fact one of these that's exactly the same as this is always listed as an arrow straightener. That you would put an arrow through it and pull it through, and where it's got a bend in it, you would apparently heat it, but then put a bend on it and hold it for a while and try to perform a real straight, you don't want a wiggly arrow, and try to straighten out or keep your arrows straightened, like a truss rod on a guitar neck. This single Stone Age artifact is proving to be the key discovery that shows that cordage production had become widespread in the Upper Paleolithic period. The team of researchers have now concluded that early rope manufacturing devices were created by some of the first Homo sapiens to reach Europe after they left Africa, supposedly, about 60,000 years ago. And that out of Africa theory has been destroyed pretty much, actually from the same Sheboygan people in genetics and the way they show that it all works out, and that it was actually an in and out and back in, and some came back out and others didn't, but others never were in and what. And so, right, you have to step it back to where we're not humans for this thing to be in effect. In fact, a few steps, and be the same common ancestor. So that's the way that works. Anyhow, let me know what y'all think here. This is That first picture was Stone Age mammoth bone cordage tool found at Hallfels Cave in Germany that scientists now recognize as a rope making tool from 40,000 years ago. That's just amazing. It's amazing what you can do with string. Starts to be the one and all. People wonder why they always had those tasseled jackets like Daniel Boone and stuff. Well, you could pop off one of those little strings and use it to tie something with. Those tassels come in handy. But look again at how this is carved into there and set. And how did somebody come up with that? And is this near the first one? Doesn't look like it. It looks pretty intricate. And then to know that on the other side, let's go back up to the first picture. On the other side, it corresponds the same way. You can tell the top picture has a swirl going into it and coming out. Right? So all the way through, the cording is meeting and twisting and pulling, and on the other side, it's still got the same torque coming the same way. Wicked, huh? Like, share, and subscribe, and enjoy, and we'll be on to the next one. Maybe I'll do one on the Neanderthal with rope, but it's got to have something else, some other firecracker to go along with it, doesn't it? We'll take a look. Peace.